So we're recording now.
Hello, Bernhard.
Hello, Wade. Wonderful to see you again.
Yes.
So as proposed, we start the interview. And I'm always sharing also the questions in the chat window, so that we don't forget. My first question would be, who are the political figures that you admire, and what for?
Well, the name that comes to mind first is Albert Camus. I read The Rebel, when I was 19 or 20 years old, and it made a large impact on me in terms of his critique of ideologues who, initially rebel for humane reasons, but evolve into being authoritarian and oppressive. I think that in terms of political figures, the second name who comes to mind really is Barack Obama. I mean, I think that though I have many criticisms of him in terms of what he ended up doing and not doing, that his basic foundation values and principles were very admirable, and that he set a good example in terms of how he conducted himself. So those are two names that come to mind.
And are there also other political figures that you once appreciated, but where you have been disappointed later?
Well, the first name who comes to mind really, I guess, is Bernie Sanders. I initially was very positive about his campaign, but as time went on, it struck me that he just was rigid and had like a tape recording, that he kept just saying the same things over and over again with the same phrases, the same words, and really in a doctrinaire way, a lack of flexibility and willingness to compromise.
So what seems important for you is that people don't just repeat something like a tape, but that they are flexible, that they can interact, that they can pick up new information or have some dialogue.
Right. And, not just, repeating rhetoric and slogans, and also with, Barack Obama, when Sanders talks about inspiring a revolution, it turned out that he really wasn't interested in organizing a grassroots democratic revolution. He was just interested in electing politicians who support his program, which I don't think is adequate. And, some of the current Democratic candidates speak in similar terms of movements and coalitions and so forth. And I haven't really investigated it, but I suspect that none of them have a plan for how to build a grassroots movement.
What were the shifts in a system or in the political system in the past that made a big impression on you? And it could be that there were positive shifts or negative shifts in the system.
Well, my first major involvement, was with the civil rights movement, and I was very involved for several years, and then when the Black liberation movement, the Black Power movement, and so forth, which was more inclined in its rhetoric towards accepting violence. I was sort of seduced by all that and all the third world liberation movements, and which you certainly understand why they wanted to overthrow colonialism.
Sure.
But I think Camus was right with regards to Algeria, even, that how you go about it makes a difference. And if you proceed in authoritarian, violent ways, you end up with regimes that perpetuate the problem. So several years ago, I looked back on that period. I was actually listening to a tape recording of one of King's speeches, and it reminded me that the civil rights movement focused on winnable reforms. They focused on demands that were achievable, and they were willing to negotiate compromises that didn't fulfill everyone's expectations. So I think, that movement towards, or, that tendency towards being uncompromising and not focusing on winnable objectives is something that disappoints me now.
So what say it again, the last one. I'm sorry that I didn't understand. What disappoints you?
Well, that period of shifting towards making extreme demands that were not achievable, and being unwilling to compromise in order to achieve reforms that move us forward. I think that that continues to be reflected in many political movements and organizations and efforts and so forth, like I talked about with Bernie Sanders. And there are many grassroots organizations that adopt a similar stance. That, I can see the value of some people taking that approach, and it's not like I want to try to discredit it totally, or persuade anyone not to do it if that's the way they want to go. But I think if too many people adopt that stance and are unwilling to also work within the system and form coalitions with people who are more compromising, it's a problem, and I see that happening. It's like mutual radicalization, that is producing the polarization that we see.
So maybe you already answered the next question. So the next question would be, which actions or omissions of myself or of yourself as a political person do I still regret?
Well, regret is an interesting word. Because people do what they do for good reason and for understandable reasons, and so I don't know. if I'm willing to use that word. I mean, there are things that I would not do again.
Yeah. Okay.
Myself, and if I had the opinions that I have now, if I were in those situations again.
So it sounds as if you could accept your history.
Yeah, I don't want to, beat myself up or anyone else, or be too judgmental. I think we can make judgments without being judgmental, and so maybe that answers your question. I'm just a little confused about what the word regret means for me now.
Thank you for questioning the question.
Okay.
So maybe so the next question is, on which political contributions of yourself are you a bit or pretty proud of, or you would say, I'm really happy that I could do this, or I did this?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, I mentioned the civil rights movement. I mean, I'm really proud of what we did, and I was a foot soldier in those efforts, but I'm proud of it. I think once I dedicated myself to organizing, though we were very radical and uncompromising when I was in seminary at the Pacific School of Religion, I helped organize the new seminary movement, and we pushed for major reforms in the educational philosophy and the governing structure of the school. And we ended up being expelled and reinstated by the board of trustees, and who proceeded to get rid of the very old president of the school and bringing in a new young president from he was a chaplain at Stanford. And they ended up making many reforms in the approach of the school along the lines of what we were recommending. And it's now an institution that's rooted in the community and does good work. Secondly, I, with some former mental patients and mental health professionals and members of the general public, we organized the Network Against Psychiatric Assault. And our first focus was against electroshock treatment at institutions in San Francisco. And we ended up having a major impact. And for a long time, there was no shock treatment in San Francisco. I think there's now a little bit done at one institution. But we got state legislation passed that helped protect the rights of mental patients in general. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
Congratulations. So this was the first part of the interview which is more personal.
Right.
Then we come more to the theoretical or abstract part. And so the first question is just, what would you say is the system?
Well, the way I see it, our institutions, our culture, and ourselves as individuals are woven together into a self-perpetuating social system that serves the purpose of encouraging everyone to climb social ladders, look down on and dominate people below them, and envy or resent people above them. That's basically how I define the system.
And would you say that, what, are you more part of the system, or would you see yourself more as outside of the system?
Both. I wouldn't say, if I had to choose, I would probably say that I'm more part of the system. I think everyone is. I think it's impossible to be totally outside of the system. And that, you know, we reinforce the system in our daily actions in many ways. You know, when we're overly selfish or materialistic or individualistic, competitive, domineering, when we're more concerned about our power rather than building power together, you know, when we're not really focused on trying to better understand what's real and to do as much as we can to improve the world and appreciate the beauty of the creation and the power of the creator.
Yeah. What would you say is the direction where you would want to see the system transforming itself to? So where would you think that the system should go? Which direction?
Yes, I don't know that I envision the system transforming itself. I think that people need to exercise initiative to transform the system by establishing that our primary purpose is to serve humanity and the environment and life itself, and reforming our institutions to serve that purpose and improving ourselves to better serve that purpose. And that being said, though, the way you asked the question is interesting. I mean, I think there are institutions that are sort of already, you know, moving towards transformation and sort of have their own internal dynamics in that direction. I'd have to think about that more. Basically, I feel like people within those institutions need to push them to live up to their highest ideals, you know, to do what they're supposed to do and, you know, serve people and not themselves or their administrators, the elites who administer those institutions.
What I'm hearing, I think what I'm hearing is that you see some positive symptoms. So that some of it is going into the right direction. Is this true?
Yes, I mean, last night I saw the Spider-Man movie,
Oh, okay.
and there were themes there which were sort of like reminded some of the Matrix, you know. And one character says, "Well, it's easy to fool people when they're already fooling themselves," and that also rang a bell with the book I'm reading that you recommended, I believe, Thinking Fast and Slow. And then, you know, I just saw the beginning of the women's soccer team rally, and I don't know how to pronounce her name, the leader of that team, and she was speaking about, not only did she talk about the need to love more and hate less, but her second point was to listen more and talk less. And I thought that was remarkable for someone to make that point on that stage. And you know, there are all kinds of encouraging things happening in terms of changes within various institutions. And so I think maybe there is a dynamic that moves an institution towards living up to its highest purpose. You know, there is a internal conflict, you know, a battle in that regard. And for a long time, most of our institutions have not fulfilled those highest purposes, but maybe they can activate those tendencies sort of more spontaneously. Maybe they can develop spontaneously.
My question that's really going around my mind all the time is, which hypothesis are we having how we can make an influence onto the system? And as you said, we are somehow outside, but somehow inside the system.
Right.
And so what would you think, which are the acupuncture points or the levers to influence the system?
Well, I think one is to encourage activist organizations, you know, that are pushing for changes in public policy, to encourage their members to engage in critical self-examination and dedicate themselves to becoming better human beings, and to support one another in those efforts, to set aside time, even if it's just, you know, 5 minutes a month, you know, to report to one another on their efforts with regards to self-development, and to make an explicit commitment to do so, so that when people look at their websites, they see that commitment articulated on the top, you know, and so that plants seeds in the throughout the society and helps spread those notions. Otherwise, I think that you know, with our organizations, we can cultivate more democratic partnerships within them, and you know, we can encourage whenever feasible, to pursue win-win objectives rather than win-lose objectives. I mean, I don't think win-win is always possible, but whenever it is possible, I think that should be a goal. And to remind members of organizations and institutions that serving their own interest is only one goal, that, you know, serving the public interest and the interest of the environment are goals as well. I mean, I don't think it's either or, you know, that I think we can serve ourselves and serve others at the same time.
So where would you say, where's the point where you want to invest your energy into, where you say this is the way I can make the best or the most impactful effect?
Well, I'm not making any assumptions about what impact it will have, but I've made a 10-year commitment to work on this website, the Systemopedia, which is dedicated to systemic transformation. And it's a collection of ideas and information and resources and proposals for action that I'm hoping will eventually be of use to people if and when more interest develops in this kind of compassionate systemic transformation. And personally, I do a lot of reading and reflecting and meditating and taking care of my body. And I meet monthly with some neighbors here in the apartment building where I live, and we discuss spirituality and share readings and, music or whatever. And I see a therapist once a week. That's been very beneficial to me. Opportunity to reflect and get some feedback from time to time.
I found it nice. I'm not sure if nice is the right word, but it feels good how you combine the level of yourself and improving your own thinking and feeling, and the next level of your neighbors, and so like this local community, and then the third level of the website where you potentially influence people from the world. So,
right, and I engage in political action from time to time. I mean, I'll go to a rally or demonstration and send out an action alert over the internet, or makes phone calls during a campaign. So that's a part of my commitment as well.
Is there something else that you want to share in the interview?
Well, there's a Buddhist saying, neither selfishness nor self-sacrifice, that struck me when I saw it on a statue of Buddha at the Asian Art Museum. It was the first time I'd heard that phrase summed up. And then another phrase that is also Buddhist from the Dalai Lama, and one of his books, he said that he encourages people to acknowledge mistakes and resolve not to repeat them. And just the simplicity of that formulation has stuck with me. I think one thing I haven't mentioned is that, as I see it, no one person or one group of people controls the system. It's self-perpetuating. So that means that scapegoating and demonizing is not correct. And it also undermines unity, the potential for unity. It's very divisive, and I just see far too much scapegoating circulating. I like Van Jones' formulation, the 99% for the 100%. I think, the elites who don't see that it's in their long-run self-interest to be more collaborative are short-sighted, you know, they just, in their greed and or their search for power, and but that doesn't mean we have to scapegoat them. We can try to encourage them to shift to a different perspective.
If I get you right, what you're saying is that we, not only is it important what we're working for or against, but rather also how to develop our own lenses, our own way to think, to perceive,
Right.
to judge without making judgments or being judgmental.
Right. And it's you know, the process is as important as the product, you know, and how we work is critical. And you know, be the change.
Yeah. So thank you very much for the interview, and I will stop the recording now.
Okay. Thank you.